What's up, y'all? Welcome back. It's been such a long time. I hardly remember the intro. The Scaling Ventures pod. We are building a portfolio of niche vertical SaaS firms that punch like 50 milli ARR giants. There it is. There it is. I got it back. It's been a hot minute. We had a little bit of a summer hiatus, at least as it relates to like the pod kind of YouTube cuts. Psyched to be back with my boy K. Lou, who's recently located to the DR, and hopefully you're feeling cozy, my
Oh, I'm feeling great. Thank God for the AC. Otherwise, you'd see me sweating.
right on. So, gosh, there's been I've been a lot of kind of operating model, system optimization, thinking about kind of splitting the atom around how do we ensure we're fixated on the most important needle moving, high operating leverage things. How do we measure that? And it's been very kind of the business as a system. So I'm feeling good about our progress there. And I guess I'm excited though to change gears a little bit and move more towards the topic for today, which is heady. The title is super heady, but ideally we'll break it down and make it much more approachable. But the headline is Deterministic versus Probabilistic Systems, which is a very important discussion right now in the LLM era. And I guess the reason we're talking about deterministic versus probabilistic is in the spirit of value creation. Like, how do you sequence value creation? What does this mean for operators, acquirers, anybody playing in the SaaS world, or anybody who's poked around in Lovable probably feels a little bit of a panic? I mean, obviously, then you can start to get to a place where it's like good luck vibe coding something that requires, I don't know, some type of airtight regulatory oversight. And if you screw up, the consequences are dire. I think all of us are still a little puckered, to get into that view. But when it's like, a visualization layer for some analytics, da, da, da. So anyway, I wanted to kind of step back. There's so much hype and talk through what I see as like probably the most rational kind of near term kind of path that you'll see. So table of contents, we've got an intro to just lay out, kind of set the table around what each is, deterministic versus probabilistic. We'll break them down a little bit further. And then I'll basically kind of argue, or like the position of this whole thing is that it's going to be a hybrid model in the near future.
Mhm.
And then we'll get into how you can take advantage of this frame and how you can leverage more probabilistic type features and a general orientation to layer on some pretty dope, nasty value to what we assume is a already pretty airtight deterministic system in the vertical SaaS you're operating or considering acquiring. Cool.
Amen, brother.
All right. So I guess vertical AI. Oh my God, vertical AI. And I guess what to say. So I think without question, all right, I want to pull this stuff apart. Like, I guess where we saw this a lot too, once upon a time, was like, well, there's an API or there's an integration, right? And it was like, well, what does integration mean? It's like, well, you take an export and you put it in this FTP thing that sits between us, and then you reach in and grab it. And it's like that was used in the same breath as API, kind of two-way read and write real-time integrations. And it's like, whoa, there's such a spectrum. So the first thing is AI as a headline can mean about 10 million things, or I don't know, but at least 100, honestly, like 100 things. So
Today,
then
AI can mean almost anything you can think of.
like it means a lot. So you want to be more specific. And then you get into vertical AI and it's like, okay, what do you mean? And I think some of the stuff that's been on magazine covers are agents. So agentic AI. So autonomous systems that can kind of interact with data, make decisions, execute actions without a human in the loop, or with a human in the loop for a very specific component. And that surely is a cool ass opportunity, full stop, where it's like, whoa, we can develop an agent that does something start to finish, very specific to a niche vertical context. And we can roll that out as a new product. We can roll that out as anything. Like, we're seeing a lot of, there's a whole bunch of use cases that are very, very interesting. So we're not going to be talking about agents today. And we're going to, and I think that is kind of the most evolved kind of edge of what's capable right now, are kind of like these agentic systems, and putting them into a very niche vertical context. There's tremendous opportunity there, and basically delivering outcomes, which is a cool place to be. But before you kind of get to that place, I just kind of wanted to level set that SaaS, the bones of SaaS are databases and automation.
It's information systems.
It's information, right? A CRM is customer data held somewhere, and it's surfaced up in certain fields so you can make sense of it, and then you can run automations like send this customer an email, send this kind of thing. So for all the sexiness, it's a database somewhere that has a UI on front of it that allows you to interface with that data, make use of that data, execute automations and things like that. And so if we switch gears now into kind of distinguishing between deterministic and probabilistic, and I think what's cool too, I guess, like if you look at LLMs, they're basically probabilistic machines, right? Like they're
Right.
predictive. So they
Everything
look
is
at
about inference when it comes to LLMs. Yes.
exact. So that's where probabilistic has really. So basically, like LLMs are really good sentence completers.
And
Is
insight providers
like
when the
it's a way
data's
to really
good.
distill stuff down. It's like, and if you break down how transformers work, like they're literally predicting the next word based on the words that came before it and in the context,
Hmm.
and they're all tuned with weights and stuff like that. So I don't want to downplay how radically complex it is. But at the end of the day, they're predictably completing sentences in the form of robust essay, or right, that scales up like crazy. So there's this concept of like, whoa, like these are kind of probabilistic, which means it's like a best attempt at what to say or put next based on
Yep.
what came before it and per weights that are tuned as a function of like distributions and mass across whatever data set you're looking at. And that's why it's so interesting and relevant right now. Deterministic is like OG flows, which is basically I want predictability. I want to put the same input in and have the same outputs come out. I want it to be very, very predictable. And this is where you start to get into like OG B2B SaaS, which is like we got to manage our customers, CRM, we got to manage our books, accounting, ERP, we got to manage our people, HR,
So you
tech,
have to.
human capital management.
So with that, you have to create repeatable, scalable processes which drive directly to the deterministic systems.
And so if we put back to like all SaaS tastes like chicken, it's usually automation of like the most foundational workflows in a business. So some are like, we need to onboard an employee. We need to, blah, blah, blah. We need to administer benefits. We need to send an invoice. We need to da, da, da. And it's like, cool. Same workflow. There's a series of input and it's a little system. Inputs, process, outputs. So some things like that, quoting, invoices, counting, commission tracking, calculations, running operations on numbers, stuff like that. And that's the bread and butter, right? Because it basically streamlined and accelerated what was humans moving pencils and pushing paper or whatever up until this point. So
And the
this,
reason why you want to classify it as deterministic is because you expect the same result every time that process runs. It's not a
yeah,
scenario where you're going to get a different insight. It's like, no, your commission needs to be tracked specifically to the formula every time. That is
every time,
deterministic.
no margin for error. So, and especially like in industries where maybe like we would call them digital laggards, or this is where you start to get into and you hear like Chamath and all those guys talk a lot about like vibe coding or 80/20 or whatever, where he's basically taking an LLM first operating model and trying to tip over Salesforce and Oracle. And you start to appreciate that, if you're in healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, anything financial services oriented, there is zero margin for error.
Right.
Right. And so back to the probabilistic thing, like 99.5% accuracy is not acceptable. It has
Yeah.
to be 100% accept to be viable, right? In certain contexts. So the headline for this and to put deterministic stuff is that, this is like where some have a buddy joked and called it like blue collar SaaS, but it's like kind of like, and so I guess for acquirers and operators, like deterministic systems probably in our context have two magical qualities. They're often under optimized. So dated UI, weak search function, low NPS across the customer base, and they're insanely sticky. So they're basically embedded into these spinal cord mission critical workflows that have very defined, need to be absolutely excellent and repeatable outcomes. Anything you'd add to deterministic before we switch gears?
I would say think about those tools that you were just describing as the ones in your tool stack right now that you love using, but it's shitty to sign into. You hate clicking the button, the entire UI. You're like, why am I even using this? But it works. You're using
Yeah.
it because functionally it gets you there. That's a deterministic system where an operator like us, we'd find a tremendous amount of growth if you could just get in there and like optimize the UI, really connect with the customer, see what they need. Like there's a lot of potential for growth there.
Perfect. So now switching gears to probabilistic systems, which LLMs are probabilistic systems, right? That's why this is such a timely topic. That's why we're talking about it. So unlike deterministic systems, probabilistic systems generate outputs based on inputs that you put in inputs and you're going to get a different output based on the probability, inference, and learning and knowledge. So there's a
Said
ton of
another way, the pattern recognition.
Yes, and pattern recognition. There's subject to interpretation. There's margin for error, et cetera, et cetera. And so probabilistic systems offer adaptability, where they can get smarter over time as the data gets better. They
Mhm.
can do a lot of really, really cool stuff. And so just to and this would basically be like they can suggest next steps. They can predict outcomes based on historical precedents. They can forecast things into the future based on historical performance. They can analyze data and uncover patterns and synthesize that into a really digestible output. They can do all of the stuff that everyone here is using ChatGPT to do. So where it starts to get very interesting, or I want to encourage everybody to think about, especially in vertical SaaS, where the deterministic stuff is your entrance to the game. And you have to deliver deterministic outcomes to become workflow-based SaaS, which is basically to become the arms and limbs that operate the business and accelerate all these things to outcomes. And so one example, and I want to encourage people to think like there is a deterministic base here. We don't need to go nuts and jump after some crazy agentic tool that does something soup to start to finish and is absolutely excellent, but it's more so of like, cool, we have this deterministic core. Where are the opportunities to layer in probabilistic features in very isolated ways? And so ultimately, it's, I think the way this is going to unfold and where the immediate value creation opportunities are in the immediate term is indexing towards this hybrid model. So it would be, here's an example, and this would be just kind of embedding probabilistic intelligence into deterministic workflows in a sentence. So deterministic would be like, quote configuration always returns the same price based on the same inputs.
Mhm.
Probabilistic would be an AI highlights which quotes are likely to close or which reps are best at specific segments. So hopefully that kind of paints the picture, right? So this thing, the hybrid gives you kind of trust and leverage where it's like the quote is going to be accurate as shit, inputs,
Mhm.
outputs. But now I get to an understanding of like probability of close based on these other determining factors. And where I guess in this context, it would be a salesperson using a thing to try and close a customer or something like that. So in a headline, the hybrid thing kind of gives you trust and leverage where it keeps the workflows reliable while infusing them with intelligence or more AI oriented things in incremental rational doses.
I would say, said another way, the hybrid model is really what pushes you closer as an operator to establish a business that is coin operated. You have your deterministic systems that are going to keep the operating model going 24/7. But the probabilistic side is where you find opportunity based on pattern recognition for areas you might have been missing as it relates to the business. So now you're getting close to coin operating this thing. I put in $1, I expect to get $2 back out.
Well, and I think an interesting frame too, like a lot of our peer group is like give away the SaaS and then it becomes the usage, the data usage of the SaaS to train models. So basically
Mm,
the data, like you give away the SaaS to get the usage data to then
yep.
train models and then start delivering LLM oriented or agentic oriented products. And I think that's maybe a little over optimistic. And so so you kind of get into sequencing, right? Where first you have to instrument like deterministic workflows that deliver repeat value. And it's guaranteed, it's accurate as shit, especially in regulated categories. Then you layer in probabilistic capabilities that increase speed, accuracy, or insight. So if you start with the probabilistic stuff, you might miss on executing the deterministic foundation. Now you break user trust, customer trust, your SOL. So I'll just say kind of trust precedes intelligence in the context of vertical B2B SaaS. So that sequencing is kind of critical. Stop and like trust is the foundation of kind of any relationship.
Trusting clean data. You can't establish trust if you don't have clean data.
So now it's like, okay, Kale, like you're speaking pretty abstract. Let's make this real. So here's a light take on kind of a playbook to harness this frame. The frame meaning hybrid models are the immediate future, and you're kind of focusing and making the deterministic core dope nasty, and then you layer on probabilistic stuff. So what does this mean? First, take stock. Like what deterministic stuff are we providing, right? Like, let's kind of really take stock. Like, this is not just kind of looking at feature sets and modules and stuff. It's like, what are the deterministic workflows that exist in our SaaS? Cool. Then you should start to probably pretty quickly identify opportunities where probabilistic stuff could be layered on top. And then you've kind of got a good view on things. Then you kind of think about value creation. And it's like, okay, we can optimize the deterministic core, which is update UI and speed up the application, make the application more reliable. This is all kind of plumbing and non-sexy stuff that no one cares about until the toilet explodes, you know? And they're like, wow, it's like, we should have spent more time on the plumbing. And it's like, yeah, you should have.
Yep.
Like,
Once you start drinking from a fire hose of support tickets about bugs,
like,
you're like, we should have worked on
like,
this.
dude, we should have fixed the plumbing. So you kind of switch gears or you're in value creation mode. So kind of the headline here, and maybe I'll share my screen and kind of, we can bounce through these. So I shaped kind of like 6 that I would organize into like cohorts of probabilistic feature things or like feature themes, if you will, that fit into this probabilistic tranche. So let me just pull this up and I'll slow down for the reader. So in big picture, you have kind of an intelligent search and retrieval. You have predictive forecasting. You have behavioral pattern detection, benchmarking and peer insights, contextual recommendations, and performance coaching. And I did my best to like really move beyond like our specific context and the companies we're operating to make these more as generalized as humanly possible. But you still see our context kind of poke through, but hopefully anyway that these are kind of useful. So intelligent search and retrieval is making structured systems more accessible with natural language. So this would be AI search over structured records like jobs, tasks, orders, forms, or whatever, smart filters, autocomplete, or guided lookup across dense databases. And the value here is reducing friction, making product more usable for non-technical users, short-circuiting things. I guess on one thing, it would be like, you need to write a SQL query to get anything out of this database. The other thing would be like, I'm looking for this, and it's like, cool, boom. Like you want to cater to the I'm looking for this.
Said exactly in that tone. I'm
Yes.
looking for this.
And then we get into predictive forecasting. So this is to surface or suggest what's likely to happen next before it breaks something, or what's
Yep.
next. And so this is predictive. And this is a little bit muddied, but this one is kind of more like proactive alerting or exception alerting. So this is more like surfacing stuff that is likely to go haywire before it does. So you're avoiding a fire drill. So kind of predicting negative outcomes that you need to stay on top of. And this is more in the spirit of broader kind of customer success, but
Yeah.
also then kind of looking at predicting things based on historical data. So you can forecast task completion, churn, errors, demand trends. You can predict exception events like missed deadlines, payment risks, stuff like
Yep.
that. And again, some of this stuff blurs into operating model of the business itself. And then there's other, and don't sleep on, and obviously that is a sick opportunity too. Like, and we should talk about that too. It's like, what kind of probabilistic shit do we need to embed in our operating model to forecast
Right.
revenue, to forecast whatever it is,
If
right?
accounting can realize that our ARR is going to be, or our ARR revenue recognition for next month is going to be delayed because these X number of customers, about 25%, are always delinquent past 15 days, we have to start working on that immediately, including like, let's say, notification banners in the platform, sending proactive emails, updating reminders through the Stripe portal. There's a ton you can do for the operating model.
Totally. So the value here is helps teams prioritize effort and preempt kind of costly surprises,
Yes.
and it kind of same for users, helps users understand and predict kind of return on effort, et cetera. Then we move into behavioral pattern detection. So this is where you turn user and system behavior into actionable alerts.
Yeah.
Example would be detect deviations from normal usage patterns, flag drop-off risk, delayed actions, scope creep, et cetera. This enables proactive support, automation, and retention plays. Another example would be like or by way of analogy, like an abandoned cart, right? Where it's like, hey, you got this thing to the 1 yard line and you didn't get it over
Yes.
the 1 yard line. Oh shit. You need to go back in there and finish the work or whatever it is. So then this is where I think things start to get really, really cool. And this is like very product centric. So this is this notion of benchmarking and peer insights. So position insights with context by referencing aggregate performance data. So this is where you can utilize the usage across your customer base to establish anonymized kind of benchmarks. And then you can let your customers know how they're performing against those benchmarks. So you're in the bottom quartile for response time. Teams like yours automate 3x more tasks per user. So this is a situation where you help users understand where they're over efficient and deficient. I don't know what the positive version of deficient is.
Inefficient. Insufficient.
Is it up? Yeah, but it's basically like you're overperforming here, you're underperforming here.
There you go.
So, and it can encourage adoption within the product as well, but mostly it helps them understand like, ooh, we're really strong over here, we're not so strong down here.
Right.
Um, Contextual recommendations. So this uses data to recommend high leverage actions inside existing workflows. So suggest next actions, suggest templates or configurations based on usage history, offer pricing or timing nudges informed by pattern matching. And apologies, a lot of this is kind of blur. I wanted to just get this out honestly, but there's a lot of blurry area here between like probabilistic tools inside the business, operating systems for the business, and how you get down and how you capture and or deliver and capture, create, deliver and capture value, right? Which is capitalism, period. And then some of this blends over to like what we're really trying to talk about, which are features, probabilistic features you can embed and implement in your product to start to move towards this AI oriented posture. Performance coaching is a little bit of an extension of the benchmarking and peer insights, but this has turned activity and outcomes into personalized improvement feedback. So identify patterns and success rates. You would be more productive if you did more of this in the product. You would be X more productive if you did Y more in the product, as measured by your benchmarks of your peers who are doing more of this and seeing these results. So you start to direct and orient users towards best practices without touching anything, which is the name of the game. Like you want them to get better and better and better and better over time. So this would drives continuous improvement across users, teams, or customers. So general take there. Hopefully this inspires. I didn't go super deep on this. Like this could be this could be our next 10 posts, honestly, is like, what are these probabilistic little like feature themes that you can attack in the
Hmm.
spirit of moving towards a hybrid product that combines both deterministic and probabilistic capabilities and starting to be a more relevant kind of current technology vendor. So we'll touch here. Last thing, I mean, like this kind of encapsulates it, but like the go to market messaging is like sell trust first and deliver on those deterministic outcomes, then deliver insights second, and position the hybrid as transformation. Like you're layering on, because the other thing too is as sexy as this stuff is, as soon as you're like, we're going to be AI, your customers are going to be like, whoa, what are you doing with our data? Well, it just raises all. Is this going to break it? Like, I don't want this thing to like maybe put together a quote. Like, I wanted to put together a sick quote that is accurate as shit. Like, this needs to not go wrong. So you position it as like we're introducing it very thoughtfully in very
Hmm.
contained areas to incrementally enhance the value. And the headline there is probably like, we're doing this in the interest of delivering insight and intelligence to you, which is a function of your usage of the deterministic core. It's probably the
Ooh, I
most
like
concise
that.
thing I've said the whole time. Like
I like that.
that's the root of it all, right? That's what we're trying to do. Shit, should have started with that. So anyway, and when you sequence it correctly, you don't just improve products. And like the example too, or what I think is a really cool opportunity, and this is like kind of the 6 inches in front of my face, so I've been a little fixated on it, is like, it's like cool. We have like a spreadsheet style report. And it's like, oh, or that was kind of 1.0. And it was like, all right, I have to chew through this, and my time to insight or my time to comprehension is all over the place, depending on how skilled I am, depending on how much data there is or whatever. And so then, was the mantra for many years, dashboards sell SaaS. So it was like use data visualizations to accelerate the time to comprehension. Like, what does growth look like? It's like I could look at this thing, or I could look at a chart that's going up to the right. And it's like growth is great, right? And I think we're in an interesting place now where we can jump over the visualization chapter milestone and get right to insights where we can say, look at all this usage, digest it, identify the patterns, and spit it out in this templated insight report. So
With
I say
recommended actions.
with recommended actions. Oh, and then put that in the context of my broader peer group, which you have unique visibility to as a SaaS vendor, right? So this is
Exactly.
where,
And message it in a way where it's clear to each function, including the at the executive level, so everyone's aligned.
and then it becomes like, I want everyone to use this so I can understand where we're great and where we suck. And then I can
Yeah.
cater my improvement plan and we can make the business better, meaner, faster, stronger, whatever. So, conclusion. Well, I'll just read this puppy. In the LLM and agentic era, the deterministic versus probabilistic distinction is no longer just for engineers. It's a strategic filter for founders, acquirers, and operators to assess technical debt, prioritize sequencing, and then layer intelligence without losing trust. So I think the companies that win don't just shout vertical AI and start just going to market with all these crazy agents that are half baked and start, and the risk there is an agent is executing a deterministic workflow, but it's using some probabilistic stuff along the way. Now you start to get to that like 92% accuracy. And it's like, no, dude, there's no margin for error in this thing over here. Like it needs to be 100%. So
Hmm.
the sequencing is critical, and knowing what to leave as deterministic and where you can complement that with probabilistic stuff, I think is going to be the secret sauce. And that's where you can really start to transform categories, where it's like you're helping the entire category do better as a function of layering intelligence into this deterministic core and comparing them against their peer group and letting them know where they're outperforming and underperforming. Okay. It's a lot of action there, I
A
gotta
lot of
say.
action there. I was gonna say, as a parting few words, what everyone needs to go do is go clean up your data right now, and
Yeah.
then make sure that your deterministic systems are set up so well that you can actually trust them based on the clean data that you've just gone through that exercise. And now you can go ahead and layer in the probabilistic systems to now provide more insights and intelligence so you can get on with transforming the business and the entire customer experience.
Yeah, and it's like back like headline messages just for the economy is that every firm is a tech firm, period.
Yep.
You could be selling birthday cakes, but your whole spinal cord is technology. How you get
Yep.
down, how you operate the business. And in that spirit, data, as it has always been, is the gasoline. And the cleaner that data is, the better the deterministic stuff works. And then the better the clean data around the deterministic stuff unlocks all of this intelligence where you don't need analysts to crunch shit. You just need a prompt and an LLM overlay, and away you go.
What a time to be alive.
It's a sick time to be alive. And that's where you start to question like the actual interface, right? It's not going to be UI. It's probably like Okay, I'm going to go in and I could look at this dashboard, or I could be like, yo, are sales better this quarter than last quarter? What do you think sales are going to be next quarter?
Could be a Slack message, a text
So
message.
it changes how we interface with technology, right? Like straight up. So it's a cool time to be in SaaS. I appreciate everyone's nervous about getting obliterated more so than ever by Johnny undergrad at MIT who vibe codes some shit unlovable, but just know the deterministic core is no margin for error. It's very hard to do that. You can compete on knowledge and empathy with your specific niche vertical. And the really exciting opportunity is to layer in some of this probabilistic stuff that's kind of intelligence oriented.
And don't worry about the guy at MIT. He doesn't have your 20 plus years of industry contextual experience. He doesn't know the right questions to ask.
There you go. All right. For the love of the game, if this was helpful, like, share, subscribe, whatever. I need to say that more,
I
probably.
love
But
it. And then we got a point. Like,
yeah,
cheers.
hit the bell, baby, or whatever they say. So anyway, much love for the love of the game. Get the laser beams
Ooh,
rolling.
no Mac Mini today.
All right. Much love, my man. I'll see you next
All
time.
right. Take care.
Peace.